The theatre goes dark. Los Angeles, 1994. Within seconds, the audience is completely absorbed. This is the opening scene of The Lion King. The composer behind that moment is Hans Zimmer. The soundtrack would sell more than 10 million copies worldwide. It would win the Academy Award for Best Original Score. It would become one of the most recognizable pieces of film music ever created. But that raises a question. Hans Zimmer did not come from the traditional world of classical composers. He was not a child prodigy like Mozart. He was not trained in elite music conservatories like many great composers before him. Instead, he learned by experimenting, by breaking rules, and by inventing entirely new sounds. That leads to a question film fans and musicians still debate today. Just how good was Hans Zimmer actually? To answer that, we have to go back to the beginning. His mother, a classical pianist, played Beethoven in the evenings, while his father, an engineer, filled the apartment with the static of homemade radios and the clatter of half-finished inventions. But Zimmer's path was not shaped by lessons or recitals. At 7, after only 2 weeks of formal piano instruction, he walked away, convinced he would learn more by experimenting on his own. He spent hours at the family piano, dissecting pop melodies, searching for patterns, and teaching himself to bend sound to his will. The living room became his workshop. Tape recorders and a battered Korg synthesizer replaced sheet music. He spliced loops, layered fragments, and chased the futuristic sounds of Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream. The early loss of his father made these experiments a kind of sanctuary, a place where curiosity mattered more than rules. At 15, Zimmer landed a job as an assistant technician at Suedwestfunk, a regional broadcasting studio. There, he learned to repair keyboards and edit tape, absorbing the mechanics of sound from the ground up. Each late night in the studio was a lesson in invention, not imitation. The city buzzed with punk, new wave, and the first wave of electronic pop. He found work at Strawberry Studios, programming synths for post-punk bands, and learning from engineers like Malcolm Cox. Session gigs paid the bills and sharpened his craft. Soon he joined the Buggles, playing synth bass and moog flute on Video Killed the Radio Star, the first music video ever played on MTV. In that historic video, a young man in a black leather jacket sits behind a wall of keyboards. Hans Zimmer was already shaping a new sound long before film scores would call his name. A few years after his arrival in London, Hans Zimmer found himself in a place that looked nothing like the grand conservatories of Vienna or Paris. Lily Yard Studios, tucked inside a converted Victorian house, was part laboratory, part workshop, and part home to a new kind of musical experiment. Here Zimmer began working with Stanley Myers, a respected British composer who had scored dozens of films but was hungry for something different. Myers saw promise in Zimmer's outsider methods, his disregard for tradition, his obsession with machines, and his knack for coaxing unexpected sounds from even the most stubborn synthesizers. Instead of sheet music and strict orchestration, the workflow at Lily Yard revolved around cables, circuit boards, and the constant hum of analog gear. Zimmer and Myers would spend hours layering drum machines with live strings, programming the Fairlight CMI to mimic the resonance of a real choir, and running sequences in lockstep with a chamber orchestra. Engineers like Tim Heer recalled the sight of Zimmer hunched over a synclavier, hands flying across the controls, while Myers scribbled string parts on the next page of manuscript. Each score became a test bench for new ideas, blending sampled street sounds with string trios, matching ARP 2600 synth pulses to live brass, and notating electronic parts on their own staves, a practice that would later become industry standard. This laboratory approach gave birth to a bold new sound, one that ignored the boundaries between classical and electronic. The breakthrough came with Rain Man in 1988. Instead of a lush symphonic backdrop, Zimmer delivered a score built on minimalist motifs, Fairlight textures, and rhythmic patterns that pulsed with nervous energy. The Academy took notice. Rain Man earned Zimmer his first Oscar nomination for Best Original Score, a rare feat for a composer with no formal training and a reputation for breaking the rules. Suddenly, Hollywood was listening. The Lily Yard experiments, once dismissed as eccentric, had become the blueprint for a new era in film music. In Gladiator, that voice belonged to Lisa Gerrard. Zimmer, searching for a sound that felt ancient yet timeless, invited Gerrard to improvise in her own invented language. Her vocal lines, layered over a bed of orchestral strings and subtle electronics, became the soul of Now We Are Free. The track's spectral harmonies and wordless melodies cut through language barriers, resonating with audiences worldwide. Streaming numbers tell the story, over 300 million plays on Spotify, with Gerrard's vocals driving almost half of user-generated playlists featuring vocal film scores. The Gladiator soundtrack didn't just top charts, it set a new standard for emotional depth in blockbuster music. 8 years later, Zimmer's palette turned darker. For The Dark Knight, he needed a sound as unsettling as the Joker himself. Working with James Newton Howard, Zimmer took a string section and pushed it to the edge, distorting, stretching, and layering violin and cello lines until they became a single, relentless pulse. The Joker's theme isn't a melody, it's a warning. High-pitched, abrasive, and unpredictable, it is a sonic portrait of chaos. Critics called it a sonic razor blade. The processed strings became a signature, copied by composers chasing that same sense of unease in thrillers and superhero films alike. Then came the sound that shook the industry. Inception's opening brah, a thunderous processed brass blast, hit like a seismic wave. The effect wasn't just musical, it was cultural. Within months, trailer editors across Hollywood were splicing brah into everything from sci-fi blockbusters to animated comedies. By 2010, the meme had spread so widely that sound design forums tracked its adoption across more than 200 major trailers. Zimmer's cue had become the voice of cinematic tension, a calling card for every would-be epic. With each leap, Gerrard's haunting vocals, the Joker's razor-wire strings, the Inception horn, Zimmer didn't just follow trends. He set them, and the world listened. In 2014, Hans Zimmer stood inside London's Temple Church, hands poised above the keys of a century-old pipe organ. He wasn't there to pay tribute to tradition. He was there to rewrite it. With only a single page of script from Christopher Nolan as guidance, Zimmer built the emotional core of Interstellar around the organ's cosmic resonance. Each chord rolled out like a tidal wave, fusing time, space, and human longing into a sound that felt both ancient and futuristic. The gamble paid off. Interstellar's score became a touchstone for how a single instrument, chosen against all commercial logic, could transform a film's atmosphere. 7 years later, Zimmer chased a different kind of alien. For Denis Villeneuve's Dune, he sculpted a soundscape from tribal chants, synthetic sandstorms, and guttural drones. The music didn't just accompany the world of Arrakis, it embodied it. The 2022 Academy Award for Best Original Score recognized not only technical mastery, but a willingness to risk everything on the unfamiliar. With Dune, Zimmer claimed his second Oscar 3 decades after Rain Man first put him on Hollywood's radar. But Zimmer's reach extends far beyond his own credits. Remote Control Productions, the studio collective he founded in 2000, has become a proving ground for a new generation of film composers. More than 150 films have emerged from its halls, with box office totals exceeding $30 billion. A 2022 industry survey found that 78% of working composers cite Zimmer's techniques as foundational. Yet this influence comes with a cost. The very hybrid sounds that once broke barriers are now packaged in commercial sample libraries, sometimes blurring the line between innovation and formula. Critics warn of a world where the so-called Zimmer sound risks becoming a commodity, traded by the gigabyte. Even so, the numbers and the emotional impact are impossible to ignore. The question isn't just how good Zimmer was, but how deeply he changed the way movies sound and how many others now follow in his footsteps. Today, blockbuster sound carries Zimmer's fingerprints, hybrid, thunderous, unmistakable. In an industry once ruled by tradition, he proved the outsider could redefine the rules for all. His influence echoes in every cinematic crescendo. For anyone dreaming beyond boundaries, Zimmer's legacy is proof the next revolution needs no permission. What do you think? How good is he?